Hello again, shameless writers. Microsoft Word is the industry standard for word processing, and the great majority of you probably use it. And I know from my many years of editing and formatting that the majority of you only know the basics of how to type words and how to save your doc. In essence, you're probably using it wrong. Now, there's no need to become an expert in Word, but if you want to save yourself some hair pulling out when it comes time to formatting, and not to mention some money when you hire an editor, there are a few tips you absolutely must know, and that's what we're going to learn today. I know, you're disappointed to see a cartoon facsimile of me instead of my actual glorious countenance. But there are just some days you can't bring yourself to spackle on the makeup, and today is one of them. I imagine you can relate, since right now you're probably wearing yoga pants. If you're wearing pants at all, you filthy degenerate. Now that we're both terribly ashamed of what we look like, let's get down to business. This is the way your Microsoft Word window looks when you first open it. You may have already adjusted your defaults to the way that you like it, or if you're like most people, you left it exactly the way Word gave it to you, which, to be honest, isn't terribly productive for most people. I mean, who wants to write at barely over single-spaced? Nobody. Nobody wants to write like that. So if you did adjust it, good for you. If you don't know how to adjust those defaults, well, good news. I'm here to help you. For those of you who are afraid to touch anything for fear of breaking it, let's dig in. In one of my first videos, I mentioned that it was absolute lunacy to use tabs or multiple spaces in your manuscript. The reason for this was that it would be a huge problem when it came time to upload it to KDP, or whatever platform you're publishing your book in. Your question then, obviously, was, well, how do I indent all the paragraphs? That's easy. The first thing you should do is make your ruler visible. The way to do that is to come up to the View tab and simply click this ruler box. Now you can see the ruler at the top. Once visible, you're able to manually drag the tabs to wherever you want. Most works will have a paragraph indent, usually about 1/2 inch. However, if you're going to be making a novel, which is usually measuring at 6 by 9, it's going to be slightly less. A good rule of thumb for me is to come out here to the second tab. So when you start your document, just drag it 1/2 inch or to the second tab, whichever one makes you happy, and poof, you're done. Each paragraph will now automatically indent when you start a new paragraph. Likewise, you can create block quotes or a hanging indent. A block quote is used if you're quoting someone directly and it's more than 40 words, which is usually the rule of thumb for academic writing. In order to make a block quote, simply drop down to the next line, highlight the entire paragraph, and instead of just dragging this top tab here, you're going to drag the entire one, and that will indent every single line and not just the top one. For those of you who are doing academic work, you might want to do a hanging indent. This is almost never present when we're talking about commercial fiction, so if you're just writing a novel, don't worry about this. But it might come in handy at some point or another, particularly if your numbered list doesn't cooperate, which, spoiler alert, sometimes they don't. Anyway, if you ever want to make a hanging indent, say for your works cited list, you would make your entry, and instead of this very bottom tab, you would go up just a little bit to this arrow here and drag that. Now it's going to try and come with you because it's stupid. So you might have to try a couple of times, but the first or second time, Bob's your uncle, there it is. Now the first line is flush with the left margin, and everything underneath it is tabbed in. You don't have to worry about making a manual hard return and then hitting tab or space or whatever to line it up the way that you like, which, by the way, is absolutely awful. If you add an entry or add a word to your existing entries, guess what? It messes up your whole document. So definitely make use of this ruler. The second thing you want to set is your paragraph settings. Now when you come in here, Microsoft Word will have it set to, I think, exactly or multiple or one of those stupid ones that nobody ever uses. And it's going to be barely over single-spaced. The font will automatically be sent to Calibri and the font size will automatically be sent to 11, Why did they choose this? I'm sure I don't know. It's ugly and no one likes it. But that's what they chose, and that's what we need to set up. Formatting your work before it's completely finished is one of those other things that causes unnecessary hair pulling out and possibly unnecessary money when it comes to editors. So while you're composing your work, I recommend using a simple double-spaced 12-point font. Now the way that you do this is you just hit double space. Most of you already know how to do this. Make sure it's 0 for before and after, and hit OK. If you want this to be the default for every single document that you open, all you have to do is hit Set as Default, and then you won't have to do this with subsequent documents. Once you're finished with your book, and by finished, I mean it's been written and edited, it's done with a capital done. Then you can format it however you'd like for your ebook, your paperback, or your hardback. Now, I recommend using Kindle Create. Is that what it's called? Yeah, it's Kindle Create. Okay. Where was I? I recommend using Kindle Create, which does most of the heavy lifting for you. Once you download it, you'll have this extra Kindle tab. It's absolutely fabulous, and it takes you step by step. You just come over here, hit Get Started, and then it takes you through step by step. You choose what you want your book to look like. However, keep in mind that this is all automated. So, as I learned the hard way with my first book, Black Magic's Prey, the font size that they choose for you might be fine for a Kindle, but it's definitely not fine for your paperback. So, for the format that I chose, it made the font 8, which was in no way appropriate for the paperbacks. So lucky for me, I discovered the error before it came out, but that would have been a problem. Now, as far as the Home tab is concerned, Paragraph is not the only section that you need to acquaint yourself with. The Show Hide button is particularly valuable. If you're opening up a legacy document or someone else's document, or you're cutting and pasting from a web browser or another program, it's amazing what kind of formatting you can bring along with you. So if you're having trouble with your document, you're doing something simple like hitting return, and your text is doing weird things, hitting the Show Hide button is probably your best weapon to determine what in the world is going on. You might discover that instead of having a regular space, you've got one of those stupid circles between your text, which keeps all the text together. That's no good. Or you might have an image frame that you couldn't see in the first place. So this is going to show you a lot of the issues that might be hidden after you paste. Speaking of paste, if you're bringing stuff in from a web browser or from another program, I highly recommend not using the Control-V function on your keyboard. Basically, that's just the easy button for pasting. But if it's not from Microsoft Word, you might be bringing a lot of stuff in with you. So the best way to do this is to paste it with this button here. When you want to paste, you have options. You can keep the source formatting, which the source is where you're pasting from. You can merge the formatting, or you can keep the text only. If you're bringing it in from a browser or from another text program, I highly recommend keeping only the text. That way you don't have to worry about any weird kind of highlighting or God knows what. I can't even tell you what kind of weird stuff I've seen get imported. The Insert tab is really helpful, but you're not going to be using it a super lot. You have the equation and the symbols over here. The equations, unless you're a math major, you're not going to use the equation at all. Now the symbols are going to be helpful if you're writing words in a foreign language. For instance, if you're writing in French or in Spanish and you need to have those accented letters, the symbols button is where you go to get those. Or if you're a masochist like me and you want to write Old English words, aka Saxon, you also go to the symbols. There's a lot of complicated stuff in here in the middle, such as cross references and bookmarks. You're probably not going to be using those very much. For those of you writing nonfiction, you're probably going to be inserting at least one picture, and this is where you do that. If you're doing academic work, you're probably going to be inserting a table. And again, that's in the Insert tab. This is also where you insert a blank page or a page break. And regardless of what type of work you're writing, you will be using page breaks. Or at least I hope you will. The Design tab should be avoided at all costs. Do not get overly creative with your manuscript. I have it on good authority if you submit something with a bunch of wonky fonts and purple text to your agent or, God forbid, to Kindle, it's not going to go well for you. So pretend this doesn't exist. Unless you're making a flyer for your neighborhood barbecue. Then go to town, but that's not really what we're here for. For the Layout tab, you're not going to be using this a lot, but it is important that you know what's in here. This is where you find your margins, your orientation, and your breaks. While you're composing, I recommend having normal margins, which is 1 inch on all sides. If you're creating a book with large graphics or an academic work, then you might have to have a page or two that's landscape. But for the most part, if you're creating a book, all of your pages are going to be in portrait. No one wants to be that person flipping their book to read the table. Don't do that to your reader. But if you insist, or if you're doing your doctoral thesis, and you absolutely need a landscape page, then you definitely need to know about section breaks. These are different than page breaks, which just drops you down to the next page. However, a section break partitions your document so you can change how or if the pages are numbered. You can change from landscape to portrait and back again. You'll notice that I've also added a custom button to my Layout tab, which you have the option to do if you're feeling fancy someday. But most of you will not need to add custom buttons, least of all this one. The only way that you'll need to do it is if you're living in a country where text normally flows from right to left. Since I have a fair few clients from Middle Eastern countries, I use this feature quite a bit, but it's unlikely you will. The References tab, listen to me and listen to me carefully. Even if you are writing a doctoral thesis, I highly recommend you not use this tab for anything other than the table of contents. Do not use the Manage Sources function, do not use the Table of Figures function, and if you're the type of person who wants an index, I recommend you outsource it. Not because you can't do it yourself, but because you'll hate yourself for doing it. That's all I have to say about the References tab for this video. Mailings is of no use to you unless you're a secretary, so we'll move on. The Review tab is where you will be spending a lot of your time when you get your manuscript back from your editor. And at first blush, it might seem overwhelming. I mean, just look at this. This is what it looks like when you get it back. You thought it was good, and this is what they send back to you. But don't panic. I get a lot of questions about what these tags mean. So when you see these, just know that it's not something that your editor manually typed. These are auto-generated by the software. And depending on how much work they do to formatting your manuscript, this can get real ugly. So what's a writer supposed to do? The easiest way is to come up here and select Simple Markup. And as you can see, all those ugly colors go away and the tags go away, and you're only left with the change bars and the margin comments. And if you have a good editor, every time they make a change, which is, for something more than a typo, they'll tell you why, particularly if it's a deletion. If you want to see all these formatting tabs, you have another option without all of this mess, and that's the reviewing pane. You can turn that on and off as you need. Finally, you have your accept and reject buttons. I highly recommend you do not use the accept all, at least not until you've gone through the entire book. The best way to do it is to go through change by change using the previous and the next buttons. Decide if you agree with the change, and then accept or reject depending on your preferences. It's important to note here that just because your editor says you should change something doesn't mean that you have to. Editors are not gods. However, if it is a matter of grammar, I highly recommend you take their suggestions. The View tab exists just so you can look at your work in a different way. I always keep mine in print layout, but they also have read mode and web layout, depending on how you plan to publish your final work. If you're creating a web page, obviously you want to see what it looks like on the web. Now, as you can see, I have a Grammarly tab. This is a free add-on that you can get from Grammarly.com. They do have a premium function, but honestly, I don't see much value in it, even for a professional editor. I use the free version, and it works just fine. However, a word to the wise. Grammarly can slow down to a crawl if you're working with a very large document, or if it's just a regular sized document with a lot of errors in it, or anything that Grammarly perceives to be an error. So if you're in Canada or Great Britain or India and you're using that silly British spelling, Grammarly might not be the best option, because it's going to detect so many quote-unquote errors that it's going to slow to a crawl. It might not be worth it for you. Finally, there are the hidden tabs. They're not really hidden, they just only appear when they're needed. When you insert or select a table or a figure, extra tabs appear. I posted this bit of relatable humor on one of my Facebook groups the other day, and I was amazed at how many people don't add images that would improve their audience's understanding simply because they're afraid of the effect on the text. There's a simple trick to this. I'm going to go ahead and insert this picture of my beloved dog Gemma. If you're a fan of dog pictures, I recommend following me on Instagram at Kristen Magoo, because dogs and food and whatever I'm reading at the time make a very frequent appearance on my page. Now when you insert this, you're probably thinking, oh, this is going to mess up the text. But there's an easy trick to make sure that it doesn't. Now as you can see, this Picture Tools tab just appeared. It wasn't there a minute ago, now it is, because we're selected on the picture. So you come over here to where it says Position. Click on it, and make sure that you select In Line with Text. That way you can hit Return, you can hit Backspace, and the picture will stay where you want it. If you put it between two paragraphs or on next to a page break or wherever you put the picture, it's going to stay there. You won't have to worry about that thing where you hit Backspace and now you've got text all up in your picture or behind it. It's ridiculous. As long as it's in line with the text, you won't have to worry about any of that nonsense. Look how cute she is. Oh, just makes me happy. It's the same thing with tables, but tables are actually much easier than pictures. All you have to do is come over to the Insert tab and insert your table. How many rows do you want? How many columns do you want? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. You'll also see that in addition to the layout, you also have a Design tab. So you can shade it, you can make it pretty, you can do all kinds of things. You can even change which way the text goes, but that's kind of fancy. And frankly, it's far too fancy for what we're doing right now. The final tip I'll give you is back on the home page. You don't have to use these, and honestly, they don't save much time, but they can be handy if you're actually editing your own work. These buttons right here next to the font. You have the ability to hit this button and it increases the font size by 1 level. Why would you use this? I don't know, but it's there and it's fun. Or, likewise, you can decrease. The one that I use most frequently is this button here, and that's to change the case. A lot of times when I get authors from other countries, they capitalize every single noun because, well, that's how they do it in their language. So I'm looking at a sentence with all sorts of random capitalization and I feel myself die a little bit inside because, God, I have other stuff to do. So instead of manually changing every single incorrect capital letter, I have the ability to highlight a sentence and select sentence case. That is the greatest time saver I ever saw. Or, likewise, I'll see a word that looks really weird, and then I realize, oh, this is supposed to be an acronym. Highlight the word, come over here, uppercase. Yay! Now I don't have to retype it. Like I said, for small changes, it doesn't save a lot of time, but it can be very helpful when you need it. And last but not least, most people are familiar with the Findreplace function, but some people are not aware of the tricks that go with it. Specifically, the ability to search for only a specific case. For instance, if you're looking through your work and you realize that you failed to capitalize Canada, well, it doesn't really make sense to read through all 350 pages and hope you manually catch them all. Instead, you can do a match case. You want to find Canada that's lowercased, and you want to replace it with Canada that's uppercased. You have the option to select Find Whole Words Only. However, this will exclude any instances of Canadian, and you want to catch those too. There are a lot of tools down here, especially Format. So if you want to find something that's in italic and change it, you can do that too. It's really great. That is, if you're a hopeless word nerd, like I am. It's amazing how excited you get when you find new toys to play with. And by amazing, I mean sad. Like I said, this is nowhere near everything you need to know about Word, but it is the bare bones of any writer's knowledge arsenal. Knowing these tabs and buttons will help you as you're writing. It'll definitely help you when you get your editing back. And it'll save you from wanting to burn your whole house down as you're preparing for publishing. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button. And if you hope to see my actual face tomorrow, go ahead and subscribe so you can revel in all of my dour glory come Sunday. Did I leave anything out? Are there any word tips or tricks that you hoped that I would cover that I didn't? If so, let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to give you a one-on-one tutorial. Or maybe if it's enough, I might make a follow-up. We'll see. Until tomorrow, take care and write well.